Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello everyone, welcome along to the RTÉ GAA podcast. We are reflecting on the All-Ireland Camogie final. Ursula and Elaine are with myself and Rory, and we were just kind of even chatting off air there, Ursula, saying it feels like this was the best of the 4 All-Ireland finals. There was a lot expected of it, and boy, did this one deliver.
Yeah, we got the match that we were looking for last week, that we were anticipating that there was going to be very little between the two sides. And what a match. Like, from start to finish, it had everything. It had drama, it had penalties, it had sending offs, it had some controversies, it had lots of bite to it. There was an anger from, nearly... the way I describe how Galway played was they played with an anger. And they brought that right from the first minute until the final whistle. And, you have to give them a huge amount of credit. In their minds, they were being completely written off. I don't think any of us thought there was going to be very much between the teams, but it just was a brilliant spectacle. The two teams deserve a huge amount of credit for that as well, because they brought their A game, and it was the best final out of four GAA finals this year, without a shadow of a doubt. So what a great way to end the kind of GAA inter-county season, really.
Yeah. Perfect way to end it, Elaine, because it just, when you've put so much effort into something and you're hoping that you're going to get like 4 spectacular All-Ireland finals, and 3 of them had been, just for a variety of different reasons, just not good contests. And then you suddenly get this one. You're like, oh, now I can't believe it's all over. It was so good to finish it.
Yeah, you're raring to go again. Like I said, this is the week now we need to be marching Camogie.
Exactly.
Because on the back of Sunday, this is what everyone needs to see. And it's amazing the amount of people I've met since who have said, I watched that back, or I look back at that part of it. And people don't generally do that with Camogie matches in general, or Camogie All-Ireland. So I think of the 4 finals, for people to be coming back to you to say, God, I really enjoyed that Camogie. I actually went back to look at that sending off, or to look at the penalty or whatever. And you're thinking, yes, this is what we need. Like, this is the promotion Camogie needs. And as Ursula said, credit to the 2 teams. They brought their A games on Sunday. And I think it's up to the rest of us now to hype them up, because that's what Camogie can give us. Like, the group games can be slow, no more than the other 3 codes. It takes time to build, but I think when you have teams of the caliber of Galway and Cork, and you have proven winners, and the players that we have, like, the word generation was bandied around a good bit before the All-Ireland final. But like, if you look at some of the individual performances on both sides on Sunday, we have players of our lifetime playing in front of us, and it's so important that people see them.
Yeah. And I think probably that was the thing that maybe impressed me the most, Rory, that there was a lot of new people that came up to me and said that they saw it. I met a lot of older gentlemen who watched the game, and some of them did say to me openly, God, it was the first Camogie match I watched, but I'd watch more of that. And I think new fans that maybe have come to the game this weekend, it is important that that's what they've seen, that they say, this is what the level is, this is what the players are, and maybe this is the game that we should be celebrating, rather than all the messing that went on earlier in the year, talking about sports and other issues. Now you've seen the product, and it was brilliant.
Oh, it was unreal. It was an incredible game of hurling. I felt like it was just enthralling stuff from the start. And I watched the pack to go to Elaine. I watched the pack again this morning. It's just, it was competitive. It was physical. The skill levels, I mean, like some of the free taking from some near enough inside your own half, like, they're not easy. That is not an easy thing to do. There was, obviously, we mentioned about there being controversy, the sending off, which I know people might feel was a sending off. I actually do think it was a little bit harsh. And I know people will say there might be bias attached to that. I think there's an issue there, and I think it's a problem across all codes, where player A bumps or nudges player B, and player B reacts and player B gets sent off. I think that's a big problem. And I think we've seen it an awful lot in all codes. I don't know what the answer is. I suppose the fact that Hannah raised her hand, that probably exacerbated the situation and probably made the decision reasonably easy for the referee. But look, on the flip side of it, and I know like we can get into it, and maybe we're getting into it early, there's been a lot of talk about the refereeing And I think, look, Ger Manley spoke and he was quite spiky afterwards, and I wouldn't have any issue with that. The only thing I would say is, like, when you watch the second half, I did think he was trying to level things up, in that he blew Galway on a couple of occasions for charging. And you were at one stage, Shauna Healy, and you're saying, where's she going to go here? She can't go anywhere. He blows for a free, and Saoirse McCarthy puts the ball over the bar. So, like, all of those types of things evened out, where I felt, which I don't know if it has come up too much in conversation, I actually think she ended up the player of the match. I thought Aoife Donoghue was quite lucky to actually still be on the field, because there was a pretty loose pull on Hannah Looney very, very early on in the game across her hand, which I thought was potentially a yellow card. She didn't get booked at all. And obviously she got booked for the penalty, which we saw was cynical enough, and that was rightly so. So, like, look, I think you can get into all of that. I think to me, when you see so much contention around the decisions, I think that adds to it. But the skill levels, and I think from Cork's perspective, I would have to say this. Pat Ryan often spoke about representing the jersey. Now, in my view, the Cork women represented that jersey extremely well in that second half. To be down a player, like, the guts that they showed, the way they dug in, they stuck to their game plan. They were still trying to pop balls off the shoulder. They were still trying to use their athleticism to, get into open space, for them to actually have that belief, to stay going right to the end, and then pop up with that goal to, to potentially get a draw out of a game, which looked for an awful long time. They were 5 points down with 6 minutes to go. I mean, it showed unbelievable guts from their point of view. In my view, lost nothing in defeat, but you couldn't take anything away from Galway. What a collective display of hooks, blocks, tackles. Like, they were up for this from the very get-go. And I think from hurling's perspective, given the fact that it's only their 5th ever, that's a good thing. That's a good thing for the sport. It's a good thing for hurling. It's a good thing for Camogi, and you'd only congratulate them and wish them well.
Okay, there's a lot to pick through in that again. So I think as a launch pad, let's start with, for Galway, Ursula, 3 All-Irelands. Like, Rory's right, to only have 5 in their whole history, but 3 of them coming in the last 7 years under the same manager. I think Cathal Murray is right to have come out and spoken the way he has, because he felt that his team were disrespected during the week. He referenced an article by the Irish Examiner, which ironically was written by a Galway man, who stands over those comments and says that he was absolutely right in talking about this Galway team, that they weren't at the same level as Cork. And some people might still feel that that is the case, but on the day, they were a much better team. And I think maybe Cathal just feels that his team weren't shown the respect, but 3 All-Irelands in 7 years, I think, speaks for itself.
Without a doubt, and some of these girls now obviously have 4 out of the 5 All-Irelands that Galway have won. Like, that's a phenomenal achievement. And the fact that they've kind of kept this consistency and have kept coming back time and time again, when you think that Galway maybe might have went away, they come back again. And the fact that, like, what impresses me most about Cathal and his management team in those 8 years, he's constantly kind of rejuvenated the team. He's made switches. He's lost some big names and replaced them with newer girls. Like, even Mairead Dillon stepping up, scoring that goal. You wouldn't think that was her first real proper year where she had started in the games. She had a decent semi-final. She progressed well throughout the championship. But, like, on the biggest stage, to score a goal like that, to shoot with such confidence and conviction, like, I feel that he got the best out of, the kind of more fringe players, the unsung heroes. Even Caoimhe Kelly, for a young girl coming in, she'll only add from that experience as well. And then obviously when you've the calibre of players of, like, to me, the triangle of Ailish O'Reilly, Carrie Dolan and Niamh Mallon, like, they scored 12 points between them on Sunday. They led from the very, very start. And when they needed the big players to stand up at the key moments on Sunday, they responded, like, and that's what you need. And I think Cathal deserves a huge amount of credit for that. Those girls had maybe disappointing league finals. You're kind of thinking, oh, Galway, I'm not sure where they're going, in what direction. And they proved everyone wrong, that on the biggest stage, we're ready. And, like, they brought 5-star performances. Like, they were incredible. Like when you even think back, like what was Aoife Donoghue doing back in the full back line to give away that penalty?
It's a
But
fair
Then
that's
point.
pops up at the other end to score points.
Yeah.
You know, but that's the ground that she was covering.
Yeah.
Like she wasn't just staying in you know, on the half forward line or the midfield. She was tracking back. She was supporting the players. Like, and I think you kind of said it right, Jacqui. It was a real collective performance. Yes, you had the standout players, but it was a real, like, you know, no one was going to break down this team, and it was like there's no way through here with Galway. And I think a huge amount of credit needs to go to Cathal, because he stuck with them even when things maybe didn't go their way in previous years.
And like when it comes to All-Ireland final day, like Elaine, you've talked about it on this podcast even last week. Sometimes when it's not your day, you just get that sense. And with Cork, it felt like early on, Galway just had their number on all of those occasions. All of Cork's big players were not delivering. And I've read since that Amy O'Connor tore her hamstring, and maybe that's why she wasn't as much on it. I don't know if that is the case, how she was able to get through the volume of work she did, because maybe that's another decision that they might be scratching. Why did they let her play? But that entire Cork full forward line doesn't score from play. All of Galway's key players play well. It just seemed to me like right throughout the field, they were winning every single battle.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things in that, I suppose. I think looking at Galway's performance throughout the championship or even the league is pointless in the lead up to an All-Ireland final, because Galway are a different beast on All-Ireland final day. And Cathal Murray is around this a long time. He is an astute manager. He knows winning that league final, or he probably would have preferred a better performance earlier in the year, but that's no good to them in August. He wants to win the All-Ireland in August. So they build. And if you look back at their group games, you know, they needed a win down in Nolan Park. They put in probably the best 30 minutes to date that day in the second half. They needed a win then the following week against Waterford in their group game. They put in a massive last 6 minutes in horrible conditions up in Galway, got a win there when they needed to. Started to build. You could sense it against Tip in the All-Ireland semi-final. You could see what they were trying to do, and then they come to All-Ireland final day. So compare, you know, doing a player rating, say, from the championship games for Galway is pointless. You need to look back at the last knockout championship games that Galway have played, be that last year's All-Ireland final, the semi-final the year before. Those are the games you need to be comparing Galway to, because they time it to run to an All-Ireland, and that's exactly what they did on Sunday. And I suppose from a Cork point of view, you'd be disappointed that they didn't expect it a little bit more. Cork looked a bit shell-shocked that Galway had come at them so aggressively, so physically, and got in their faces. And like we all knew that that's probably what Galway were going to do. Galway were going to have to do it. They were going to have to bring a massive performance, and they were going to have to unsettle Cork. And that's what they did. And I think you'd just be disappointed that maybe Cork didn't anticipate it more. And it probably took them, as you said, when you get to All-Ireland final day, the time goes by so quick when the tide is turning against you. It's so hard to turn it. So you give 5 or 10 minutes, maybe even on the line or whatever, looking, going, right, what matchups have they got? They got our better there. We need to do this there. And suddenly you're halfway through the half. And I think that's what resulted in the red card eventually. I think it was just all that Cork frustration. Yeah. They couldn't get a grip on the game. They couldn't find their foothold. They couldn't get the scores as freely as they've been coming all year. And suddenly frustration just bubbles over. Galway are in their faces. They're giving them the nudges. There's the hard tackles going in. They've had the penalty. It's been saved. The tide is turning against them. And I suppose it takes them that first half to try and steady that. Now, huge credit to them, because I said at halftime, I was like, oh my God, I wouldn't like to be managing that emotional Cork dressing room at halftime, because you're 5 points down. You've just had a player sent off. You've had big players, big voices, big names in there. I can only imagine the chaos it must have been. But when you look at their second half performance, then they obviously managed that halftime really, really well. Came out, as Rory said, stuck to their game plan. Maybe a little bit too much at times. I felt they probably, when they got the fresh legs on, you could see the fresh legs were starting to buzz around the forwards there. They weren't getting the scores, but Cork were still putting in kind of 50-50 balls to them, and that was giving Galway the chance to bully them off the ball and get it out again. But again, credit to the Galway forwards, because they were still working their socks off and forcing those 50-50 deliveries. So I suppose, look, comparing Galway to league or championship up to an All-Ireland is pointless. And as I said, you just be a little bit disappointed maybe that Cork didn't anticipate it more for that first half.
The difficulty is, Rory, I think this was probably thrown at the hurlers as well, that, they didn't get much of a test off Dublin. So when they went into the All-Ireland final, they weren't ready. And similar with Cork, they win their group, so they go straight through to a semi-final. They feel like they didn't get enough of a test because they managed to overcome Waterford. I still thought Waterford threw the kitchen sink at them in the first half, but the overall winning margin, people saying maybe they didn't get enough of a test. There's very little they can do about that. I think Elaine is probably right. Maybe it's more around what you anticipate, what you're going to get. Because even on this podcast last week, both of our pundits here outlined exactly the game plan, the goal we were going to bring. It was going to have to be physical. It was going to have to be low scoring. They were going to have to go hard at them. That's exactly what they did. It just seems that maybe Cork didn't anticipate the fight, the goal we were going to bring. And I think maybe they got everything absolutely spectacularly right. And a couple of things Cork didn't get right.
Yeah, but I'd say that, like, I would feel that if Ger Manley was sitting down watching the semi-final, and I had a conversation with Ursula on the Friday, and I did text you, Ursula, and I said I fancy Galway here, didn't I? Did I? I did, right? And the main reason was I saw something in the Tipperary game that would have had me worried. If I was Ger Manley, I would have said, like, there looked to me like there's a togetherness there. There's a really, like, Brian Cody famously used to talk about spirit. And like, they were just willing to go for every ball. No sense of self-regard for their own safety. They were like, you would absolutely feel that they were going to bring it. I got that sense right from the very get-go, right after the semi-finals. And I think Ger Manley should have known that. And I think he probably did. No, was it a shell shock? I mean, look, there hasn't been much between the two teams in the previous All-Ireland finals. There was only a goal in it last year, and Galway probably felt they didn't bring that level of aggression, which we saw on Sunday. So, can you prepare for that? It's probably difficult, but I'm sure, look, these are the kind of challenges. I thought they fronted up in a big way, especially the likes of Aisling Thompson, Laura Tracy, I thought was outstanding, Laura Hayes, Libby Coppinger in full back. I thought, you know, they battled, and particularly in that second half when you needed leaders, the likes of Maeve Cahalane as well, Orla Cahalane, I thought came into it really well in that second half. But look, I think sometimes, like Championship hurling, All-Ireland finals, like, it's on the day. It's on the day. And Galway brought it in spades and deserved their victory. And sometimes that happens. It sometimes can be as simple as that as well. And that might seem like a very rudimentary sense of analysis here, but I just thought they just wanted it that little bit more. They were extremely well coached, as both Ursula and Elaine has said, in terms of making sure that it was a case of, you know, when they went when they went after the ball, it was not a sort of a mano a mano situation. It was going with a sort of a group element to their tackling, hooks and blocks. And there was obviously the game plan to try and be physical, to try and get hands on, to try and be aggressive. And I think ultimately it bore success, it bore fruit for them. But I think they've incredibly skillful players as well, Jacqui. You people shouldn't be under any illusions on that regard either. And I think they deserve their victory.
Yeah, no, I agree. I guess the point that I'm getting at, Ursula, is when that physicality comes and there's a sense that the referee might be letting it flow, and we can get into the big decisions now. I felt that Cork looked like they weren't ready for that, because we talked about the physicality that Galway were going to bring, and it seemed to me like Cork were rattled early. That one that Rory talks about where Hannah Looney, she did get an awful slap on the hand now early on, and that looked to really rattle her. A similar situation happened with Aisling Thompson. I thought the three ones that I thought Ger Manley referenced were interesting. He felt Carrie Dolan's was a dive. I'm not sure about that. Look, people might feel 50-50. There was contact and she's entitled to go down there at that stage. He referenced the Hannah Looney red, which I think Rory's right. Once she raises her hand, I think he has no choice but for her to get the line there. Whether people think it's harsh or not, that's just the reality of the situation. If you raise your arm, you're gone. And I think Hannah knows that more than anybody today. I do think the one that he referenced about Amy Lee getting what was a blatant push in the back, and it was shown on the big screen. When you lose a game by 1 point, I think you're entitled to latch onto that, and I think that is the thing that is really a bugbear for him for the rest of this week, for the rest of this year, and I think that is going to bother him. But I think what might bother him most is that when that physical gauntlet was thrown down, that his team were rattled and it took them too long to respond to that challenge.
Yeah, and I think Galway also, as well as the element of the physicality, I think they got inside kind of Cork's mentality as well. And as you said, they were rattled. They looked disorganised at the back. I rarely would say that about Cork's backline, But I don't know if anyone noticed it, but we were right in the corner, obviously watching them in the first half. And Mairead Dillon had just scored a goal, a brilliant goal or whatever. About 3 or 4 minutes later, there was no one within 15 metres of her. She was inside on her own. If a ball had come in, it was another goal. Cork looked all over the place. They looked confused. They didn't know. They were nearly getting consumed about tagging certain players that they were forgetting about the Mairead Dillons or the Caoimhe Kellys or whoever. Like, now I know obviously they were man marking, Aoife Donoghue, Niamh Mallon, but they didn't look as organised as I would expect from Cork. The Galway goal was very similar to how Waterford got in and scored their goal in the semi-final as well. So again, something I wasn't expecting from Cork. I usually would expect that Cork would learn from something like that. They looked very open for that goal as well. Like, obviously Aoife Donoghue had 3 girls around her and she laid out to Mairead Dillon, but it was those little things that maybe caused the frustration, being rattled. But Galway definitely got inside Cork's mentality, definitely. And that was surprising to me. And I suppose in an All-Ireland final day, there's so much things going through your mind. It's a big occasion. It's the biggest game of the year. And Cork are obviously very used to the occasion. I don't think there was any ounce of complacency or anything that they were thinking it was just going to be a walk in the park. There's no way that Cork had that, way of thinking. But they just didn't look their normal kind of composed self. And I suppose you have to give credit to Galway for that, because they weren't giving Cork the time to look up and hit the ball at ease. They weren't given the time and space to maybe run at Galway, because once they got hit once, there was another Galway player coming in to hit him. It was relentless with how Galway were attacking them. And you could see that Galway were very much out on their feet in the last few minutes. I think that was probably part of the reason why Cork even came so strongly into the game. Some of those Galway girls had put in such a shift with their work rate, with their tackling, with their hooks and blocks, that if there probably had been another couple of minutes in that game, like, Galway could have been in trouble, because they were out on their feet. And that was hugely down to the fact that they were after working themselves into the ground for 60 plus minutes.
And on those decisions, Elaine, any qualms about any of those big calls?
No, I think the 3 that Ger referenced, as you said, the Amy Lee one was the most obvious one. It was blatantly obvious that she got a push out over the line, and the fact that Caoimhe Kelly went on to score a point, I think she probably thought herself she was going to be called back, because there was certainly a goal opportunity there, and then we'd really be talking about it. But that one, yeah, definitely. The sending off for me was a straight red. There's no qualms about it. You raise your hand, the ball's out of play. If the ball is in play, you can't raise your hand to attempt or to strike an opponent. That's a no-brainer. And the other one was the last one, the free. I think, Kate Wall probably bundles into Carrie Dolan, pushes her out over the sideline. It's a free. I would say 99 times they're going to get that one. But I think if you look back on it in the cold light of today, and maybe Chairman is probably not in that headspace at the minute, but I've looked back at it a couple of times. There are definitely a couple, if you look over the full 64 minutes, and in a game of that pace, that ferocity, that physicality, there's always going to be misses. And in a 1-point game, you're always going to look back at the ones that went against you. But I think Galway could have a few that they feel aggrieved with as well. There was twice there in the second half. Aoife Donoghue, coming near the end, was blown for overcarrying.
She was nearly had the head taken off her.
Yeah, Sabina Rabbit had one shortly after it. She had won it really, really well, caught a super ball, and Libby Coventry was...
She was fouled about... Libby Coventry must have fouled her about 5 times, and he blows for her free out.
Yeah, and actually on that, I think Sabina Rabbit had a fantastic game when she came on for Galway. She came on in, I think, the 41st minute or something for Caoimhe Kelly. Didn't score, but my God, I think she had about 8 or 10 possessions, and she held up the ball, which is what Galway needed at that stage. They needed a little bit of time just to reset at the back, and she kicked it, she stood on it, she walked on it, she lay on it, but she held it up and gave them time, and she stopped Cork getting out again and rebuilding again. So look, I think on the whole 64 minutes, like, obviously in a 1-point game, you're always going to look back at the obvious ones and the ones that could have gone this way or could have gone that way. But I think over the course of the full hour, I think Justin probably got the big calls right, and there's probably a couple both sides could feel aggrieved with. But look, on that 7 place balls each, I think, for both sides, the skill, the free taking in general over the 3 games over the weekend, but specifically Saoirse McCarthy and Carrie Dolan. Like, when you relook at that Carrie Dolan one, especially from the angle behind, the way she even stood over it, and given that she had missed the one in the league final 2 years ago to win the league final against Tipperary from almost the same position, but under the Hogan stand as opposed to the Cusick stand. So the Cusick stand probably suits her a little bit better as a left-handed striker. But like, it was just her composure, slotted straight over the bar. You knew from the minute you lifted it that it was going over the bar. She just throws away from it back into position. Like, and I think to take that free after the 63 grueling, punishing minutes that had gone before, like, you do well to go down to the field on your own now and stand on the sideline. Well, I certainly wouldn't anyway, Ursula might, but to have put in that physical effort for 63 minutes and then to slot that over as if it was the first minute of the game, like, I think speaks volumes of her as a player and as the Galway captain and the Galway leader. I think when they could have been rattled, that Orla Callahan goal should have rattled them. As Ursula said, they were out on their feet, they were gassed. Cork looked to be coming at them, and then she has this chance to win it and to show that composure. I think is just a testament to the free taker, the player that she is.
But just to say, just in relation to the referee, I remember back in 2017, 2018, those All-Ireland finals between Kilkenny and Cork, where it was just a free fest.
Yeah.
And we were given out and criticising that every single free was being blown. And I understand the frustration from maybe Cork and Germanley, and Galway were aggrieved probably last year with that goal. That was very, very lucky that it was allowed. Like, it wasn't probably a clear cut hand pass or whatever. But I just think Justin was probably trying to allow more of a flow to the game. Yeah. To be fair to him, I think he did get the big calls pretty much right. There was obviously things that could have been blown, but I'd hate if we were here talking about the fact that the game was all about frees than the skill level and the intensity and the physicality, because that's what we've been looking for the last number of years.
Yeah, I do think
looking back on the game, Sergeant, there wouldn't be people looking back on the game to watch free taking. As Ursula said, we gave out about those finals for long enough. Like, if someone wants to watch free taking, they go watch the Field of Skills final. It's a game of camogie. Strength and condition has come on leaps and bounds. The players have looked for it. The supporters have looked for it. And now we've got it. I don't think we can complain about it.
Yeah. The thing is, though, we probably have two of the best free takers in the game. Like, some of the scores that Saoirse McCarthy got, Rory, as well, were absolutely outrageous. Like, Carrie Dolan's one to win it. Not just the one to win it, but some of the other frees as well. So I do think, we don't want a free taking contest. No. But I do think now when people talk about camogie players as hurlers, one of the things that they are often compared to is their ball striking ability. And I think when you are showing young children how to play the game, I think all you need to do is look at those two players who I have absolutely no doubt could be contenders for Hurlers of the Year based on their performances throughout the year, not just on Sunday. I think that's what you want to be showing people. These are the skills of the game. Look how amazing these free takers are.
Yeah, and I noticed as well, I think Saoirse's using a Torpy, which is those bamboo hurleys, and they're quite heavy. I've got one myself there. Like, from a free-taking perspective, you really do need to... your strike needs to be extremely pure with those hurleys, because they're like, as I said, they're like, if it's any way off, like the sliotar just won't fly. I don't know if Elaine or Ursula would have ever used them, but I think the skill level in general was just a sight to behold. The execution of sort of like a lot of the players' ability to get the ball away when in the tackle, to try and keep the play moving, the running, as I said, off the shoulder, their, short little hand passes, the intricacies of all of that. And I think it's magnified the level that the players are at, because they're having to now execute it under the physical contact that we all wanted. So what's actually being demonstrated here is how good these players are, and how the very, very highest level. Like, I think camogie is in a very rude health with these two particular teams. Would we be surprised that the same two teams would be back in the All-Ireland final again next year? I probably would not. I think the key and the ambition for the sport and for the administrators and for the governing body is to try and get other teams up to that level. And, wouldn't that be something to really go after, and feel like it could be something that would really add like a little bit more depth at the top table, I think. And, we are away in a hack.
Yeah, that would be special. Let's round it off then on sort of thoughts around the year and the game. And the one thing, Ursula, even yesterday, I was thinking about your team, and just, when you talk about generational teams, generational players, it does sort of make you even go back and appreciate your team now, because 3 in a row even based on looking at this Cork team and how hard it is to do it, I think, like, you know, I mean, people will know it's obviously well publicised. It was their 8th attempt at it and they didn't do it. I'm sure your WhatsApp group must have been absolutely hopping this week with the Wexford girls appreciating.
Well, they said it's safe for another 2 years anyway.
Yeah. But I do think, though, it does make you appreciate just how competitive it is right now, how hard it is to win 1 All-Ireland, not to mind win 3.
Yeah, like I've had a few conversations with different people since Sunday about it, and it probably, I've kind of think myself, I don't know, it's because I'm getting older, but I've become so much more reflective about my career, Camogie career, and that in the last while, where I'm kind of like, Jesus, we were part of something so special, and to win the 3 in a row is no easy thing. And you know, it just shows, like, Cork were on such a good run, you know, 17 championship games in a row, and then bang, you know, they lose on the biggest stage by 1 point in injury time, and it's back to the very beginning again. And now I suppose questions around, will there be, and it's not like I'm trying to push anyone into retirement, but will there be retirements? You know, the likes of the Mackies have been there for a long time now. You know, Laura Tracy, these girls, they have a lot of mileage under the legs. You know, it's not how they would have hoped. Sometimes you don't get that fairy tale ending where you'll go out on a high. You know, I'm not saying these girls are going to retire, but it will take a long time again to get back to you know, put your position in yourself in a position for a 3 in a row. And yeah, it's hard enough win 1. And Galway know that themselves, you know, that they've only won 5 over the course of their, you know, over their lifespan of playing Camogie at this level. And to lose, I think they've lost, 17 All-Irelands at senior. So, like, they've had their fair share of heartbreak too. But yeah, the 3 in a row is definitely something that's, you know, Cork will feel, are they ever going to achieve that again? Because 8 attempts now, and you know, it won't happen now for at least another 3 years. But yeah, that's something for another day for Cork anyway. But it's definitely been the year of the underdog in hurling and Camogie, and it just shows anything can happen on an All-Ireland final day, really.
Last word to you then, Elaine, because it has been, you know, Ursula said, there's a lot wrapped up in all that history of it, but Galway have cemented their place again as one of those truly brilliant teams. 3 All-Irelands in 7 years. This is spectacular what they've managed to do.
Yeah, and as Ursula said, the group of players that now have 4 of the 5 that their county have won, like, what a title to have after your name. And as for Cathal Murray, you know, Tony Ward had 2 of those 5 up to Sunday, and Cathal Murray now has 3 of them. He has certainly cemented his place, and I read an interview with him earlier in the week, or early yesterday, to say, you know, back in January, February, he was thinking, what have I done? What have I signed up for again? But I'm sure the last couple of days have more than made up for that for him. And it's huge. Look, see the excitement that it brings to Galway Camogie and to other counties. You know, the likes of the Tips and the Waterfords now will look. And I think whenever there's a really hot favourite beaten, it gives everyone a little bit of hope for the following year. You know, it's going to be a long, cold winter in Cork, but other teams now will be looking at what Galway have done and they'll think, God, you know, it's not unachievable, and Cork are not completely unbeatable in any code. So, you know, I think it gives hope to everybody when the underdog wins. Now, obviously, that's no consolation to Cork after the year, but I don't think it should take away from their performance either. As I said, their second half performance, like, they outscored Galway in that second half. That's another few minutes, and we certainly, I think, have been looking at a replay probably next weekend. But look, that's no consolation to them. But I think it was the biggest game to end the season on, and Galway are just so lucky that their work rate, their hunger, and their desire, I think, is what got them over the line. And I think that's a hope that any young child or any player playing any kind of a game can hold on to, that if you're willing to work hard enough, put in the sacrifices, that anything is possible, especially on All-Ireland final day.
Yeah, it certainly is the best game of all to round off what has been an absolutely incredible season. Elaine, Ursula, thanks so much for being with us. Rory, we've enjoyed it all, haven't we?
Yep, we have. We certainly have. It's been a fantastic year. Football, hurling, well, maybe from a Cork perspective, not too fantastic, no either. So we shouldn't get too carried away. But look, back to the clubs now. I'm sure people will like the club championships are ramping up all over the country. They'll be they're kick-started in Dublin there last weekend in football, and they've been ongoing. And I think that's the nature of it. I know people will have their gripes about split seasons and this and that, but I think, look, it's the club time now, and we're all looking forward to that. We're all club people as well, ultimately, and like, that's something to look forward to now over the next couple of months as we lick those deep wounds, Jacqui.
And they are deep, that is for sure. To everybody who listens, thanks so much for being with us on the journey. We will talk to you soon. Enjoy the club season.
Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point.